for a fact that most leaders in their own right in South Africa and reasonable South Africans will not accept the principle of one man, one vote.
I am fearful that we are on the brink of a catastrophe, which is totally unnecessary.
I'm not prepared to lead white South Africans and other minority groups on a road to abdication and suicide.
We hope that the steps President Botha has outlined will advance the end of apartheid.
The violence of our enemies is a warning to us. We who are committed to peaceful negotiation also have a warning to them. Don't push us too far.
I watched the speech and I read it twice. I found nothing.
The prevailing climate of violence and repression in South Africa has created conditions where racial polarization is rising. It is imperative that the South African government and responsible black community leaders take steps to forestall such confrontations.
U.S. officials have privately warned South Africa that unless changes are made, the Reagan administration won't be able to block the sanctions bill now pending in Congress. With the issue still unresolved, the biggest American dealer in gold coins, Deke Pereira, announced today that it has stopped selling South African Krugerrands.
More than 100 people, many of them members of the Trans-Africa Group, which has been in the forefront of the anti-apartheid protest, converged on the Boston Deke Pereira office. There were no attempts, as in some previous rallies, to occupy the coin dealership. The rally had been scheduled prior to Deke Pereira's announcement that it was temporarily suspending domestic retail sale of the Krugerrand. The protesters questioned Deke Pereira's motives in suspending its Krugerrand sale.
We feel that part of what Deke Pereira is saying is a public relations ploy and also an attempt to cut any losses, if the Senate basically outlaws Krugerrands.
And as for the likely impact of Deke Pereira's Krugerrand decision on South Africa's economy?
Probably a zero effect. What it will do is probably put a small premium on the existing gold coins.
Demonstrators say that they will continue these protests against Deke Pereira because the company's motives in the Krugerrand decision are suspect. And they say they'll expand their activities to include companies like IBM in an effort to encourage the administration to take still stronger action against the minority government of South Africa. I'm Gary Armstrong, the New England News, Boston.
Hello, welcome to Dead Air Live. This week's show is titled Destructive Engagement, U.S. out of South Africa. My name is Greg Rosenberg, and for the next hour we will be talking about South Africa, and in particular about how we as U.S. citizens can have an impact on ending apartheid in that country. We will be talking with several distinguished guests, and we'll look at a documentary that was made about one of the demonstrations that took place this past March at the downtown offices of Deke Pereira, protesting the sale of the South African Krugerrand. Things are happening so quickly in South Africa that even the update that opened this program is out of date already. Quoting from today's Boston Globe alone, South African police used whips, tear gas, and rubber bullets yesterday in an attack on legally striking black miners, injuring 13 and arresting 83 union stewards and strike committee members. In Cape Town, police shot and killed a schoolboy, bringing the death toll to 32 in the current wave of violence in that country and to 675 for the year nationwide. And last night, South Africa's Foreign Minister Roelof Botha said that past governments may have gone too far in racial segregation laws, but that whites had a fear of being dominated by a leader like Idi Amin. To sum up the situation in South Africa, as well as the history of the United States' relations with that country, is far beyond the scope of a one-hour program. But what we can try to do is offer a little background and focus primarily on one strategy that has been particularly effective in the anti-apartheid movement in the United States. Our first guest, Fahamisha Brown, is a member of Trans-Africa and is the coordinator of the Free South Africa movement of Boston and coordinated the protests at Deke Pereira. Welcome.
Thank you.
Fahamisha, could you say something about your responsibilities at the Free South Africa movement?
Well, first a little bit about the Free South Africa movement itself. I don't think people are aware that we're not really an organization. The Free South Africa movement is a term that's applied to anti-apartheid activities in the United States since Thanksgiving Eve 1984. It began with a sit-in at the South African consulate by Civil Rights Commissioner Mary Berry, Congressman Walter Fauntleroy of the District of Columbia, and Randall Robinson of Trans-Africa. They were arrested. They sat in to draw attention to the United States policy of constructive engagement. That grew into daily demonstrations at the South African consulate in Washington, D.C. Nationally, that grew into people selecting a target representative of apartheid in, first of all, the major cities where there were Trans-Africa chapters, and has mushroomed beyond that to some coordination of the student divestment campaigns on the university campuses, to municipal divestment campaigns in cities and states around the country. The Free South Africa movement in Boston took as its first target the honorary consul here in Boston. Within the second day of demonstrations at his office, he submitted a letter of resignation. And we moved on to Deke Pereira, which was the most visible symbol of United States connections with the Republic of South Africa. Deke Pereira is an international coin dealer and were the major traders in the South African Krugerrand. The South African Krugerrand, providing some 50% of the gold revenues of the Republic of South Africa, became our next target. And we set as our goal to get Deke Pereira to stop selling Krugerrands.
Now, at this point, Deke Pereira has suspended the sale of the Krugerrands. Do you consider that a victory?
In a limited way. In the first place, the timing of it was very clearly suspicious. Approximately 1 month before it looks like the Senate is going to outlaw the sales of Krugerrands, Deke Pereira says, well, we're suspending retail sales of Krugerrands. We will continue to do an international trade, and we will deal with dealers. We will continue our work with dealers. So what that says to me is that they're putting their customers on warning that you may be stuck with something you can't resell. So if you want to sell them to us now, as a dealer, we'll buy them from you, because they are worth the gold. And so that was not really a principled decision, but it was also a good public relations gesture, given that they made that announcement on the eve of a scheduled demonstration, which they were very well aware was about to happen. And this was after a period of about a month in which there had been no demonstrations at Deke Pereira. So I think that also the timing of that decision had something to do with that also.
Now, has the impact of the demonstrations gone beyond Deke Pereira itself?
Well, the demonstrations also had the function of trying to educate the community about, first, the nature of apartheid, the degree to which this country cooperates with that process, the nature of constructive engagement, and to arouse the citizenry in this state and with other Free South Africa movement activities nationally to affect the legislative process, which it did. In both the House and the Senate, anti-apartheid legislation was introduced again in this session of Congress. The House passed a bill, the Senate passed a weaker bill, it went to conference, it got some of the stronger provisions of the House language put back in. The House passed the bill again, and the Senate is on its way to passing the bill. It's stopped only by a filibuster, threatened filibuster by Jesse Helms and his crew. And that's 8 senators that obviously won't be able to stop this.
So what are some things that we as individuals can do to help push that legislation? And I know that a presidential veto is also a possibility.
Presidential veto is not only a possibility, but a probability. The Senate returns from recess on the 9th of September. And so we assume that the vote will probably get taken that week, and it will go to the president for his signature. At that point, it becomes necessary to continue to lobby the Senate to override the veto. We anticipate that the legislation will pass by a significant margin, that if all those senators hold firm on their vote, then indeed they will override the veto.
What do you see as a next step if the sanctions are indeed overridden in Congress?
Then we have the immediate victory of a certain level of disengagement from our connections, from our governments, and our official corporate connections with the Republic of South Africa. That's a clear signal to the Republic of South Africa that the friendship that it counted on with the United States of America to kind of hold its place in the world community is weakening, and that public opinion really is against it. And that puts, again, another kind of pressure on that government to pay attention to its own people.
Okay, well, with the time remaining, I was wondering if you could say something about future targets for the Free South Africa movement.
Well, the Free South Africa movement includes the campus divestment movement, as I've said, and you have the university movements that are geared towards getting those universities to examine their portfolios for investments in corporations that do business in South Africa and to divest. In addition, we are interested in people who work for corporations who have investments in South Africa. There have been some movings in that direction. Corporations are pulling out, selling their holdings. Where there are also banks that have made the decision to stop loans not only to the government but to private businesses in South Africa. So looking at the ways in which your life and your activities connect with the Republic of South Africa and impacting on that. The other thing are South African produce, in particular the Cape Granny Smith apples that are in supermarkets during this time of year. A large percentage of the Granny Smith apples in the supermarkets during the summer months come from South Africa, and they usually have little stickers on them that say Cape. So that's where they come from. And so you like to let your supermarket know that you don't want them to sell them, that you're not going to buy, not only you're not going to buy those apples, but you're not going to do business at that market. You're going to find some place that doesn't handle these goods.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Fahamisha. Could you give us a number to call for the Free South Africa movement?
437-0228. That's an information line. That's a tape. You can leave a message there. You can find out what activities are being scheduled. 437-0228.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to be showing a documentary about one of the many demonstrations that took place at Deek Pereira during the past year. This demonstration took place last March on one of the coldest days of the year. It was organized by students from the BU School of Social Work with the help of TransAfrica. The documentary also includes considerable footage from ABC Nightline's historic broadcast from South Africa that also took place in March, which marks the first time that many of South Africa's black leaders had the opportunity to talk with white South African leaders. The documentary is called Social Workers for Social Justice.
Is the policy of apartheid justifiable on moral and religious grounds, do you think?
I think that one cannot look at these things solely in moral or religious lights.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just asking you whether it can be justified on those grounds.
I think it can very much be justified. It all depends on how you define apartheid. But the point is that what is necessary in this country more than anything else is growth. When everybody's poor, when people are poor, there's no chance of having social justice in the country. I mean, in no other country did one have instant social justice. And this is a matter of a country raising up all its people, uplifting them in the standard of life, economically, in their per capita income. And that's why South Africa is such an exciting country, because we're doing this job.
Here we have Percy Kaboza, a man who was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard. I suspect he doesn't need any more uplifting, at least intellectually. Your response, Mr. Kaboza, to the notion that the white man's burden in this country is to lift up the blacks.
I have a particular problem responding to people like Otto, because at the end, I say to Otto, you're an educated man, I'm an educated man, you're a civilized man, I'm a civilized man. Whatever the standards you make, what makes you superior to me? Why must you have a vote and I don't have a vote? In fact, why must a white alcoholic tramp sitting at the parks of Johannesburg have a vote and be superior to me? I mean, if you can begin to relate to apartheid in those terms, then I can understand what you are talking about. But you are talking about naked racism and trying to elevate it to a status where it should be accepted by the community. And every time you react to the international outrage against that policy, you always say people don't understand, but people understand.
The people united will never be defeated. 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 The people united will never be defeated.
My name is Sheila Armstead, and I'm a graduate student of the BU School of Social Work.
Okay, and you were one of the organizers for today, I understand?
That's right.
All right. Could you tell me a little bit about this rally particularly and what you've been doing at BU?
Okay, the graduate students and faculty of the BU School of Social Work organized this demonstration, and what we're doing is we're actually demanding that Deep Pereira stop selling the South African gold coin, the Krugerrand, and we're urging customers not to do business with Deep Pereira.
Has it been working? Are people not going in there?
That's right. As a matter of fact, the Deep Pereira has closed its doors, and apparently they are running scared. They are affected by this adverse publicity.
What about, people been down here every day? Is that true?
People have been demonstrating prior to this demonstration, and they're doing the same thing. They're demanding that Deep Pereira stop selling the Krugerrand.
And also, there's something about the arrest in the news lately that they're not arresting anymore. What do you think their position is on that? Why aren't they arresting?
Well, they're not arresting. They don't want to make any more arrests because they don't want the issues that are raised by this demonstration to be publicly debated. That's basically.
They're scared of all that press getting out there, huh?
They're really scared, yeah.
Right. Tell me, I'm a social worker myself. What other social workers, what can we do to help this issue?
Yeah, well, we can demonstrate, and we can, listen, we should just feel morally obligated to express our opposition to apartheid, to racism in South Africa. And in doing so, we're also speaking out against racism here in the United States. Okay.
They have to be connected, don't they?
Exactly,
right.
Always.
All right. Thank you very much, Sheila. Good luck.
Oh,
Good to see you down here again.
Thank you. Well, you will.
Okay. Thanks.
I hope not, but
I hope we do it soon.
Right.
Okay. Thanks. How's that?
The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.
My name is Liz Arujo. I'm a Boston University social work student, second-year student. I'll be graduating in a few months.
Tell me a little bit about the group for here today is from BU, and how has this started? A long time? People have been organizing a while?
No, a couple of weeks ago, one of our students at BU was asked to organize a demonstration. So he came to me because I'm the chairperson of the Third World Caucus at the school and said we should do something. And so the Third World Caucus at the school is spearheading this. And so we pulled it together in about 6 days, believe it or not.
Fantastic. Well, it's a good turnout, it looks like.
Very good turnout. We have made probably 500 phone calls to get people out here.
Fantastic. Tell me, I'm a social worker as well. What is the role of social workers? What else can we do to help this issue, to stop apartheid?
We can get out here every day and demonstrate, which the Reverend Hagler asked us to do. I think, for me personally, it means confronting racism, institutional racism, racism in other people, the racism that people have in themselves on a daily basis. It does not get confronted in this country. People do not look at it.
Right, and by confronting the issues in South Africa, we also can bring the issues home here.
Absolutely. Hopefully this will give some people some awareness, not just of the issues in South Africa, but of the racism and other political and economic injustices that go on here in this country.
That's right. Let me ask you one other thing. There has been recently in the papers the arrests of Mel King and Skandra and several of the legislators. I understand they did not want them to go to trial. Do you know what's that all about?
Deep Pereira did not want them to go to trial because Deep Pereira is trying to keep a low profile. They don't want any more media attention. This is why they have their doors locked from 12 to 1:30. But we're sticking around. We're going in at 1:30. We're going to confront the manager. So stay around.
If they don't come around, shut them down. 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 If they don't come around, If they don't come around, shut them down. If they don't come around, shut them down. If they don't come around, shut them down. If they don't come around, I gave an appointment. Shut them down. If they don't come around, 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 shut them down. Don't come around, shut them down. If they don't come around, I have an appointment. Apartheid, no. The sale of Kruger has got to go. Freedom, yes. Apartheid, no. The sale of Kruger has got to go. Freedom, yes. Apartheid, no. The sale of Kruger has got to go. Freedom, yes. Apartheid, no.
Don't let their appointments in, huh?
Has got to go.
Could you tell
Freedom, yes. Apartheid, no.
Could you tell me how many times has it actually closed down? People have done the protest.
I guess they've closed about 3 or 4 times maybe in the last few months since December. But it's been a lot of times they claim for lunch hour, but they've never closed for lunch hour before, really. And so this is an attempt to keep anyone from going in from the picket line and occupying the building. They desperately don't want to arrest at this point, so that's what they're dealing with.
They're not arresting, are they? Are they trying not to arrest?
They're trying not to arrest desperately. When we were here a week ago Tuesday with Mel King and the other folks, we occupied the building for 7 hours and there were no arrests. And at the end of the day, Deke Pereira responded by saying that they would leave the lobby open and we could come and go as we please during the night rather than arrest anyone or evict us.
Why not arrest?
Well, I think they're afraid of the publicity. One of the things that is clear is before Mel King and David Scondras and Bruce Bowling and Willard Johnson were to go on trial, articles appeared all across in the national press. And Deke Pereira doesn't like that publicity because it's not good for business. And so they dropped the charges. The district attorney's office dropped the charges, but we were sure it was emerging from Deke Pereira, and so Deke Pereira doesn't want to do any more arrests to keep from having that national publicity on it.
Does it hurt them being closed today for an hour or two?
Excuse me?
Does it hurt them being closed today for an hour?
Oh, sure. Lunchtime is a time they do good business. Everyone down here gets out for lunch, and if they're coming in to trade money or something, they come to Deke Pereira during lunch hour. So I think this hurts their business significantly. It's just as you saw the guy who had an appointment, and usually make an appointment when you're going to do some heavy-duty money trading. And he couldn't get in, so they just turned that business away, obviously.
Do you try talking to the customers and trying to explain to them?
Sure. Particularly when they got the doors open or we're on the inside, we spend time talking to the customers, challenging them morally on why they should or should not be doing business with this company. Some customers hear our appeal and turn away. Others who are, in my opinion, callous, continue to do business.
So thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
Your name?
I'm Reverend Ellis Hagler. Fired up! We'll take no more! We're fired up! We'll take no more! We're fired up! We're fired up!
We'll take no more. We're fired up. We'll take no more.
I'm proud to be here today. It's the other way around, Jeff. And I want to applaud all of you for coming here today because this is a social work issue. Apartheid in South Africa is directly opposite to all of the values that we as social workers hold dear, right? Right. That's why we're here today, right? Yes. Because the social work community must be leaders in this protest movement, right? Right. We're going to spread the word, right? That's right. In South Africa, Winnie Mandela, the wife of the leader Nelson Mandela, who's been in prison far too long, knows directly the issue of social work values and how they're opposed to apartheid because she's a social worker. Now, Winnie can't be here today, but we're going to walk today for her, aren't we? That's right. And for her and all the other non-persons in South Africa.
I have been banned now for 23 years. The banning order means complete isolation from the community, that you can only meet one person at a time, that you are restricted to your premises. In my case, I am under house arrest. I am restricted to my house from 6 p.m. to 6 in the morning.
25 years from now, when your children are your age, my children are my age, where will this land be?
I'm afraid only the Botha regime can answer that. I'm afraid it's only the Botha regime that will bring about peace. I'm afraid one can only visualize very tragic times ahead of us if the government is not prepared to dismantle apartheid. If the government still thinks the black man is going to wait by the side, wait for the white master to dismantle apartheid at his own pace, as much as the Afrikaner is prepared to fight to the last drop of blood, so does the black man today, to fight to the last drop of blood for his honor, for his liberation, for his pride.
We have as much right to protest it here in front of this place as the South African people have a right to protest it in that country, a right that they cannot truly now exercise. And therefore, because this is so, we cannot rest until this system has faced its demise and its disappearance from the face of the earth. Now, the thing that we are here to protest is something more than the mere sale of these Krugerrands, even though that is a part of the evil system. We are here to protest our government's involvement, our government's toleration of international racism. Okay? And we cannot fall away, we cannot move away until that system is dead. Yes, sir.
Well, I think you have to look at the situation in South Africa as a dynamic one, and obviously we don't consider that our policy is a static one. It is a general approach. Constructive engagement is a general approach based on some general assumptions. As the situation evolves on the ground, naturally we have to moderate in terms of that evolution on the ground, and we will do so.
And that means that it is possible that the United States might do something more than simply issue condemnatory language?
I think we've done a great deal more than issue condemnatory language already, and there's many examples that one could point to. But at the same time, your question begs another question, Ted, and that is, what is this heroic alternative that is hinted at when that question is posed? We've been down a number of roads in the past. The track record is not brilliant. Our approach is based on a certain set of assumptions. And it seems to us that we have produced some concrete achievements, both regionally, and we do have a regional policy in Southern Africa, as well as in terms of promoting an opening up of the political system in South Africa and the building of a basis for the white government, which everyone agrees must take the first steps to move forward.
What would we do if in this country that started to happen again? It happened before, but what would we do if in this country that started to happen again? We wouldn't stand for it. What we would do if the country of our roots that started to happen, we wouldn't stand for it. Well, we're not going to stand for it happening to our brothers and sisters in South Africa.
Ain't gonna let you Pereira turn it around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let you Pereira turn us around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking up the freedom land.
Now, those American companies may be doing something to help a few people, but the masses of South African people are suffering under one of the most oppressive systems that exist on this earth.
Well, just let me say something more on the disinvestment. Go ahead. If the American people decide to withdraw their money from South Africa, the people that they want to help and assist will be the people that will be most hurt, and not the white people in South Africa. And I want the black unions to consider that if they withdrew money from South Africa and they're going to close factories and mines, there will be more jobless blacks than whites.
Mr. Ramaphosa?
It is true that if there is disinvestment, people would suffer. But the point is, black people in this country have suffered for well over 300 years, and the suffering that they will go through is not much more than what they are going through now. We've got massive unemployment in this country. We've got the oppression that is being perpetrated by the government, and that is suffering. Now, the people who are affected eventually by, who are employed by those companies are not millions. We're not talking about millions. And in the end, the very black people who are employed by those companies would take a decision that this is a sacrifice that we have to make.
Your name?
Jeff Wilkinson.
And where do you go to school?
Pardon me?
Where do you go to school?
I go to school at Boston University.
At 1:30, when this place opens again,
Yes.
what's going to happen?
Some of us are going to go inside. We'll try to convince Mr. Dalia to come out after all and speak. We'll talk to the tellers and ask them to stop selling the Krugerrand. We'll stand in front of the doors, and if customers try to come in and do business, we'll try to dissuade them from doing that.
Good luck, and I hope this works well.
Thank you very
Keep
much.
up the good work.
Thanks very much.
We're fired up! We're going in! Deep Pereira, blood money! 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 Don't come around! Shut them down! 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 Shut them down! Don't come around! 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 Shut them down!
Go spend it at the Bank of Boston. Go spend it at the Bank of Boston.
My personal money.
So you just have to do it at the Bank of Boston?
And you know, I'm buying fiddle music for a bunch of people who are expecting it.
I'm a musician also, and there's other musicians here who even helped organize this thing. But we're asking people not to do business and use other foreign exchanges. This is the largest seller of Krugerrands in the nation. It's the largest seller in New England.
I was not aware of this at all. I had a personal check from the bank made out to them, so either I just have to do this in a couple of weeks, or I just do it now. And I don't want to deal with Bank of Boston because they're
that's not exactly true either, but they can.
You want to deal with Bank of Boston because their policies? They're pretty crooked, and also they cost me. They're crooked. $15 more.
What about the system?
I agree with you.
You do agree?
Yeah.
Let's take your business. Let's go outside. That would be the best way to go. I understand that the cost that it could do. All of us who are risking arrest here will have to pay twice that, even to go through the proceedings, even if charges are dismissed.
Twice what?
If we get arrested today,
All right, listen up
we'll
real
be
quick.
paying for more than that just to get the charges dismissed.
Those of you who want to be outside, do that now at this point. Those of you who have made a commitment to stay, do that too.
Those who want to leave, are free to leave.
Those who don't,
So there'll be some arrests. We're going to be paying a lot of money.
Never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.
This whole corporation is going bankrupt.
Are there any other places in Boston that sell the paper?
I don't know. Well, we don't have one. No, I don't think so. Because we're sending people down.
Let's have a caucus here.
Greg, come here a second.
Excuse me, can I speak?
I want to buy a sterling.
You can go to another exchange rate around the corner.
It's cheaper.
Okay, but it's also dealing in South Africa, and you're familiar with the situation there?
I'm familiar with that situation, but I wish to buy sterling, nothing to do with South Africa.
But by working with this agency, working through this agency, you're supporting the apartheid system. If you just go
I'm
to
not
bank,
supporting the
yes,
apartheid
you are. You come
system.
into Deep who is one of the largest exchange markets
I'm
for
not
the
supporting the apartheid
You are by being in this
situation.
building.
I wish to buy sterling, and I wish to buy it. Thank you. It is my
It's your right, and it's my right to
right.
do it, too.
Okay?
I agree. It's not right. They're wrong. They're dead wrong in this age.
I mean, one of the things I think that this may do is you struggled all your life.
I struggled. I went to Dorchester High School. He went to South Boston High. I went in the service. He went in the service. You know, we're thankful for this job. This job right here, we're thankful. So we do a decent job and more responsible to more people that we meet. Thankful people, all kinds of, 17 years, 16 years, never had a bad thing against me, never had a person come up. I've got friends all over. I went to St. Martin last week, the first time I ever went on vacation with my kids, Paris Island. 3 of the people I wrote letters to are all black people. Harley Bishop from 494 Tremont Street, Myrtle Watkins from 10 Temple Place. Decent, respectable, hard-working people. But I find that I have much more in common with the working class black people do I do with some of these white people who espouse all this liberal bullshit when I know where their kids go to school and all that sort of stuff.
There's going to be, somebody's going to make a statement here in a minute. I want to catch it outside.
You can make it outside, the statement?
Yeah. Why don't you just make the statement, because the camera can't hear everything. Okay, sure.
You have to squeeze it.
Thank you very much. Tell me you all didn't make an impact on Deke Pereira? Deke Pereira didn't want to call the police, but they had to. They had to.
Yeah.
We clearly made our mark in there. We Deke Pereira back in December that we were going to be out here come rain, snow, cold, sunshine, whatever. We were going to be out here until they stopped selling the cougar out. They haven't stopped, but they understand now that we hold true to our words. That we're going to be out here for however long it takes until Deke Pereira stops this immoral, murderous behavior of investing in a gold coin that drips in blood of our brothers and sisters in South Africa. We are not pleading, we are not begging, we're not negotiating with Deke Pereira to stop selling the cougar rod. We're demanding that they stop that because we don't beg for anyone's freedom. We don't beg for anyone's God-given rights. We have to demand it. And we have a long history of demanding freedom and justice to be done in this country by taking to the streets. And the only time that we have ever turned people around in their immoral behavior is that we took to the streets and we confronted them every place they stood until they could not resist our moral call any longer. We're going to continue to confront and resist Deke Pereira until they stop this murderous, immoral behavior. I want to thank all of you, because you made a good show today. You stood strong in the cold. Your numbers look good. You went in there with fire in your voices.
They heard you sitting back there on the phone. I saw one person hang up the phone because they couldn't hear who they were talking to. All right. You need to continue to stand strong like that. What we're doing is a link-up of our issues. We're speaking to our brothers and sisters in South Africa, and we're speaking to that racist, fascist regime in South Africa. We're telling them to turn it around, or it's going to come down. That's exactly what we're saying by taking to the streets all across this country. We are saying here in the United States, we're asking that people join our ranks. We're asking that people walk with us on this line, because you cannot be innocent if you deal in a gold coin that drips with blood. You cannot be innocent if you deal in any type of monetary advancement that deals in slavery, exploitation, and dehumanization. That's right. It is all related together. You cannot write a check here in the United States that has to do with some merchandise that comes from South Africa and say you have nothing to do with apartheid, or you have nothing to do with that racist regime. By writing that check or peeling off that cash, you are saying that I support white supremacy. You are saying I support that way of life. And we can't let that happen to be moral people. We're going to have to continue to be in the street. Big Pereira is trying to understand that they got to stop doing business in the Krugerrand, or we're going to shut down and shut them down over again and over again and over again until they go out of existence. God bless you all. Stand strong. See you tomorrow, 12 noon.
I ask you, Otto, in all sincerity, please listen to what I'm trying to say. Are you aware of the seriousness of the situation in which we find ourselves at this point in time, this day, March 21, 1985 in South Africa? Are you aware of the depth of feelings of bitterness and frustration of the millions of young black students and scholars? Are you aware of the feelings of the black workers? Are you aware of the feelings of many of the people of the rural community? And how much of that comes across and is understood, Otto? And if this is not understood, how do you see the possibility of a peaceful resolution of our country? To talk about exciting times when people are dying, when people have these deep feelings of anger and bitterness. Please, Otto, let us become more aware of the bitter reality which we have to face in our country. I'm pleading with you.
Hello. We're honored to have two guests who are participants in this demonstration. Reverend Graylin Ellis Hagler is a co-pastor of the Church of the United Community of Roxbury, an active member of Boston Free South Africa, and the line leader of many of the protests at Deke Pereira. And Don Polk, the executive director of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, a social worker, lawyer, and an activist on the national level in the Urban League on South African issues. Also invited was the current manager of the downtown branch of Deke Pereira, Jonathan Marcus, who unfortunately declined to appear on this program. Welcome.
Thank you.
First, is there anything from the documentary that either of you wanted to expand upon?
Well, I want to make some note of the fact that we keep hearing from white South Africans what is good for blacks. We keep hearing from American corporation heads what is good for blacks. I think we should take with a grain of salt any time a fox tells us what is good for a chicken, okay? And I think that what we can see South Africans doing is expressing what is good for themselves. They're telling us with their feet, they're telling us by throwing stones, by throwing whatever that is available to them, that they're tired of this system and that they will put their lives on the line to get rid of it.
Graylin, was there anything you want to expand upon?
Well, I think that the documentary that was put together is a pretty good job of showing some of the activity and urgency that people are feeling around this issue of dealing with South Africa. I think that we need to continue on with our sense of urgency until the apartheid system is entirely dismantled.
Don, wanted to ask you, basically, how can such a place as South Africa exist in the 1980s?
Well, I think it can exist in the 1980s, and unfortunately, it will probably be able to exist in the 1990s and so forth and so on. As long as we find racism, we find underlying it most often some economic system in which one group has massive power and dominates another. And so when you have those various conditions and human greed playing a role, then you can find this kind of system. What we see now is that system having turned worse over the past 50, 60 years, and now at a really massively bad situation. So that we're not to be surprised that we find such a system in this day and age. We're to be determined to try to do something to change it, even if we must do that from outside.
Graylin, what does it say about our government and our business community that choose to have dealings with the South African government?
Well, I think it says one clear thing, that in terms of the way our government does its foreign policy or the way our corporate structure does business, there is nothing moral about it. Their judgments and their decisions and their policy is based on making a dollar by any means necessary, which means that they will exploit, enslave, or sanction the exploitation and enslavement of whoever, as long as it's good returns on their dollars. I think you can clearly take a look, for example, at the Reagan administration. Their foreign policy that Reagan claims that he has, which is almost invisible to everyone else's eyes, but it's really a foreign policy, for example, that is based on economics and in a sense of getting the best return on your dollar. And that goes from our relationship currently to South Africa, to our relationship to Central America, to our relationship in any place that there are people of color around the world. I mean, I think one thing that we can clearly say about our foreign policy is that it is a racist foreign policy. It is built on favoring whites over people of color. It is built on power and profit to whites over people of color. And again, it comes back down to almost the sharecropper mentality that we encountered at the close of emancipation, where blacks were no longer slaves, but somehow they were working the same land that they owned, and the bills kept going up on that land as they tried to move into possession of it. It's the same type of relationship that this government currently has with people of color in the world. And what is going on in South Africa? I mean, those are some reason why it relates to people of color here in the United States. How this country relates internationally is also an example of how this country relates to its own people of color. In a sense, is that we're almost legislated to be exploited and enslaved unless somehow we decide to take destiny into our own hands and turn that around.
That brings up to mind one criticism of the Free South Africa movement I've heard among whites is that it deflects attention away from the situation in the United States so people can focus on racism in South Africa and somehow wipe their hands of racism back in the United States. Do you see that as something that's happening to any extent?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it actually does the opposite, is that our focusing on South Africa actually reflects back to our racist tendencies in this country. It's just like, for example, Ronald Reagan can talk about democracy and turn its back on any semblance of, turn its back really on a fascist regime in South Africa and sanction that in a sense as being a friend of the United States. It's almost the same relationship to people of color here. We, in a sense, are removed from having positions of power and positions of voices in our own country. The way that land is used against people of color in this country relates to what goes on in South Africa. We are relegated to our own Bantustans in Boston, for example, as the government takes over more and more land and forcefully removes us from the land when it becomes valuable. It's the same type of relationship that goes on in South Africa. So our focusing in on South Africa causes people to deal with their racism here and their racism abroad.
I think also that black people in particular had better really give some attention to how we respond to this kind of situation around the world. It was in response to the African liberation of the 50s that brought about the black liberation here to the extent that it took place in the 60s. And we cannot be in a position where every other group is heeded when something happens in this homeland, in Poland and Ireland and other places around the world, and we are not heeded when our brothers and sisters in Africa are being oppressed. That is not good for us in this country. And so to the extent that we express ourselves on any issue, whether it be national or international, we grow more powerful and more able to deal with the kinds of situations that we face here.
Well, what are our responsibilities for what is happening in South Africa as a country and as individuals?
Well, as a country, I think that we're clearly propping up a government. I had the opportunity to meet with 14 people who were traveling from South Africa in 1984. It was a mixed racial black and white group, primarily of educators. And one of the things that was interesting as they talked about divestment with me, we were talking about affirmative action. They were interested in that, and I was interested in divestment. And they talked about it as not being critical what a few companies did, okay? But if Americans started divesting in South Africa, what it would signal is the end of the protection that they felt, or the friendship that they felt from the American government. That if American companies moved out, the American government would not stand by them so closely.
Graylin, what has been the impact of the anti-apartheid movement in the United States, do you think?
Well, I think there's been a number of things. It's heightened awareness, clearly, of the citizens of this country in reference to what is going on in South Africa. I think a number of people who have been on the lines and been involved in this, they started a while back. So this has not been a new issue in terms of a lot of people's lives. This has been an ongoing issue. It started for me in seminary, for example, with the seminary refusing to recognize that white South Africans were given preferential treatment over black South Africans in seminary. So it started way back then. It has clearly heightened an awareness of what is going on in South Africa. Hopefully it also heightens our awareness globally of what is going on with people of color in this world, and also that people of color are not going to accept enslavement anymore. I think those are the things that it speaks to. Hopefully it also moves us to grapple with the issues, to try to discover how we as a people in this country can relate more morally and with more integrity to the rest of the world. Hopefully it keeps that question before us, because too often we bury our heads in the sand and we don't want to address those types of questions. The other thing is that not only increasing awareness, we make a statement by being involved against apartheid. We make a statement to the business world, to educational institutions, that we don't want them, if they're going to talk about being moral and being learning institutions or institutions full of integrity. If they're going to make those statements, we don't want them to be putting money into something as sinful as the current regime in South Africa. So it's also keeping those types of pressures alive and letting people know, and letting big organizations and big companies know that people are watching their behavior and watching where their money is going.
And it's very encouraging to the people of South Africa who learn that we are working conjointly with them. It's very encouraging. Reverend Alan Bosak, in speaking to the National Urban League Conference, stressed that a great deal, and really said that the South African blacks really do know that they're being supported in this country.
Wonderful. That brings me up to the question of what we as individuals can do. I know we could go down to Deek Pereira and participate in the demonstrations there. I know that there's another demonstration coming up in the next few days. What are some of the things that individual citizens can do that will have an impact on what's going on in South Africa?
Well, one thing that we can do is understand that there is nothing that one person can do that is insignificant in protesting this kind of thing. So that starting with Rosa Parks refusing to move on a bus and the kind of movement that brought about, we can see that we are part of undermining the government of South Africa, therefore putting the kind of economic pressure that will eventually bring about change in that system. That is what is making South African businessmen sit up and take notice and speak to the government, okay? And anything that we do to discredit that system starts to unravel it largely economically and therefore politically also.
I also wanted to invite people this Thursday, November 5th, from 5 to 6, to join us at the Star Market at the Prudential Center on Boylston Street. They are one of the Star Markets, for example, that are selling Granny Smith apples, which is an import from South Africa. And so we're going to have a line up there until Star Market decides to stop selling that produce, which comes from South Africa. But people also can be involved in exploring stores and other type of merchandising place in their communities to see what products come from South Africa and demand that they not be sold in the community.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank my guests, Graylin Ellis-Hagler and Don Polk. Thank you very much for coming down, as well as Fahamisha Brown, our first guest. I also like to thank Hubie Jones and Lee Staples for their moral support, and especially the Elizabeth Peabody House, without whom the documentary could never have happened in the first place. In 2 weeks, on September 17th at 8 o'clock, the next Dead Air Live show will be titled Under Fire, Litigation Against the Tobacco Industry. Please join us for that show. Until then, on behalf of the Somerville Producers Group, my name is Greg Rosenberg. Good night.
And we can, listen, we should just feel morally obligated to express our opposition to apartheid, to racism in South Africa. And in doing so, we're also speaking out against racism here in the United States. Okay.
They have to be connected, don't they?
Exactly.
Right.
Always, always.
All right. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Oh,
Hope to see you down here again.
Thank you. Well, you will.
Bye. Thanks.
I hope not, but...
I think, for me personally, it means confronting racism, institutional racism, racism in other people, the racism that people have in themselves on a daily basis. It does not get confronted in this country. People do not look at it.
Right, and by confronting the issues in South Africa, we also can bring the issues home here.
Absolutely. Hopefully this will give some people some awareness, not just of the issues in South Africa, but of the racism and other political and economic injustices that go on here in this country.
This is a social work issue. Apartheid in South Africa is directly opposite to all of the values that we as social workers hold dear, right? Right. That's why we're here today, right? Right. Because the social work community must be leaders in this protest movement, right? Right. We're going to spread the word, right? That's right. Like it is.
What would we do if in this country that started to happen again? It happened before, but what would we do if in this country that started to happen again, we wouldn't stand for it? What we would do if the country of our roots that started to happen, we wouldn't stand for it. Well, we're not going to stand for it happening to our brothers and sisters in South Africa.
Some of us are going to go inside. We'll try to convince Mr. Daria to come out after all and speak. We'll talk to the tellers and ask them to stop selling the Krugerrand. We'll stand in front of the doors, and if customers try to come in and do business, we'll try to dissuade them from doing that.
We don't beg for anyone's freedom. We don't beg for anyone's God-given rights. We have to demand it. And we have a long history of demanding freedom and justice to be done in this country by taking to the streets. And the only time that we have ever turned people around in their immoral behavior is that we took to the streets and we confronted them